style today. My name is Melanie Trailer. Tomorrow I have a new class releasing over at Quilt Class that is called Inner Beauty Quilt Top Class. So this is a class all about how to make the Inner Beauty quilt, and then we end up going through the whole thing and making it together. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the pattern and the class tomorrow when it actually releases. Today I wanted to give you a little freebie preview of the class. It's actually one of the lessons within the class, and it is all about fabric placement, choosing fabrics, a look at some of the different mock-ups that I've made, and just some things to think about overall when you're going to make the Inner Beauty quilt. I thought this will be helpful for the students within the class, of course, but I also thought it might be helpful for those of you who have bought the quilt pattern and are struggling to place your fabrics. So we're going to watch that lesson, and if you're interested in the class, or even if you're just interested in the quilt pattern and not the class, links to everything is right below this video. So I kind of wanted to go into fabrics a little bit. I want to talk about lightness and darkness and contrast and busy prints, and show you a little bit to think about before you start, choosing which letter goes with which fabric. And that's what you're going to do, is you're going to choose your 12 fabrics and you're going to pick which letter belongs to that fabric. Okay, so if you're looking at page 4 of your pattern, the diagram that is on the screen now is the same diagram that is in that pattern. And everything, the little paragraph below that diagram on page 4 tells you how to get the same look to your quilt as this diagram. So if you're looking for the same lightness to darkness ratio, you can go by that paragraph and choose your fabrics that way. But we're going to kind of delve into them a little bit and talk about the most important things to look out for. And then before we kind of go into that, if you look at page 2, you can see which fabrics touch. And the reason that this is important is that certain elements in certain places, and we're going to go over them, need to be high contrast. And if they're not high contrast, you're going to lose a look. So before I get into that, let's talk about let's look at a couple of different diagrams. All right, so this is the one from your book. Here it is in Cinnamon Tea. This is one of my fabric collections. What grabs me about this version of the quilt is all the yellow. So I've chosen my eye fabric as the brightest, and it's used here and in these 9 patches. So that, I really like the look of that. I've also chosen my darkest fabric as E, which really frames up this quilt, and you have this kind of ombre effect going on in these 3 blocks. And I tend to really like this ombre. Every time I do a mock-up, I'm usually trying to make some sort of ombre go on here because I think it makes the quilt really pretty. All right, in this version, I feel like the eye grabbing is in a couple of places. For one, this pink is very different from all the other colors, and I'm talking about this pink right here. So it is very different from all the other colors, which are usually kind of gold or earthy tones. But my darkest fabric on this one is fabric J, and that kind of gave the whole quilt a different look. And I think it's one of the only mock-ups I've done where this is the darker fabric, but I really like it. Again, I have these 3 blocks going in a sort of ombre look. All right, this is my Someplace Grand fabric collection. For me, the pink is what is jumping out here. So it's the framing right through here, and it's not really ombre, but it's a very similar darkness of colors, and it really makes this frame. The yellow here in the stars is also kind of popping to me. I really like that too. All right, this version, the pink is popping with the stars, right, and the 9 patches, and I've used again my darkest fabric for J. And there's sort of an ombre thing going on here. It's a little bit less. I really like the look on this one. And I like that E fabric is kind of out there in color compared to everything else. All right, and here's the one in Garden Therapy, and this is the one that I'm actually going to be making with you. But on this one, the thing that's grabbing your eye is C fabric, which is right there, and L fabric. And those are my darkest fabrics. So those stars on both sections, the inner stars and the corner stars, they are both being eye grabby. I've kind of done a little bit of an ombre look right here to frame it up, but I guess this green right here would be my third darkest fabric. So I like using a dark fabric there because it gives the quilt a nice frame. Let's go back to this one. So I keep saying in these quilts, when you make your A the lightest fabric, your eye goes towards the inner part of this quilt. Like you'll start focusing on this area instead of some of these other areas. And let me show you what happens when you make it darker. It kind of changes the whole look of the quilt. It doesn't look bad. It just looks different from how I've had it. So that's kind of something to play with. In your pattern on page 3, there is a planning page. Everything is labeled. If you make a couple copies of this, you could make you some different mock-ups and try to experiment with different looks, making different parts of it darker versus lighter. That might be a little bit hard to do because you have to color it all in, but it's there for you if you wanted to take the time to do it. Here is what I would focus on. At the end of this video, I'm going to put this on the screen so you can have it if you wanted to write it down or take a screenshot. But to me, this is the most important thing to think about when you're planning your quilt. Nothing else matters as much as this. I'm going to get over here to the cinnamon tea because I think it shows up a lot easier. This fabric right here, that is fabric F. If you don't make that fabric high contrast to fabric A, you're going to lose the framing up that makes, that fabric F makes in here. I'm going to show you it on the different mock-ups I've got here. Here's fabric F. Wait, I'm sorry. Here's fabric F. And here's fabric A. If those aren't high contrast, you lose the look fabric F makes. Here it is on Sun Meadow. The yellow is fabric F. This one is the pink as fabric F and the white as fabric A. On Sunburst, this floral is fabric F and the white is fabric A. If I was to make fabric F a similar shade, it kind of look. Let me try a different mock-up. All right, so here's fabric F, here's fabric A. If I was to change fabric F to a similar shade of peach, let me find one. Let me get it closer. I completely lose that framing. I completely lose it. So I would focus on making sure that fabric F and fabric A were high contrast. Regardless of whether you made A dark or light, it needs to be high contrast to fabric F. And you can see here, my fabric A is a medium color and my fabric F is white, so it pops. On this one, my fabric A is white. Again, my fabric F is medium colored. So it pops. It pops a little bit less on this one. This one pops pretty good. You've got A in white and F in a darker pink, A in a light pink, F in a yellow, and then cinnamon tea. My A is a cream colored and my F is a dark orange. And then the original mock-up I did, A is a very pale pink and F is a really dark brown, or I guess a golden brown. So that is an important thing to make sure that you are doing when you choose your fabrics. All right, next most important thing when choosing your fabrics is the stars. All right, they need to be high contrast. It doesn't matter which one's darker than the other. So on this one, I've got the background being darker than the actual star part of the block. On this one, I've got it reversed. I've got the stars in very high contrast to the background part of the block. So you've got your yellow and your white. On this one, I've done the same thing, but it's pink with white. This one is a little bit busy, but it still looks pretty nice. I would focus on color first and then think about busyness. So on this one, it's a little busy. Let me show you what happens if I put them as two similar colors. Let me find my pinks over here. All right, if I don't think about which fabric for which letter right here, then my stars could get completely lost and end up looking like that. And you almost can't even tell they're stars, especially from far away. They cease to look like stars. So make sure your C fabric and your I fabric are high contrast. Your C fabric and your I fabric for your inner stars, and then your L fabric versus your A fabric need to be high contrast too. Because again, if I was to make this too close, I've just lost pretty much lost my star. Although that is hideous right there. Okay, so those to me are the most important letters to think about. And what you do to this star affects, of course, this one, because if I made it dark, let's see, I've got some fabrics over here. That really changes up the whole look of the quilt. All right, so that is my tips on choosing fabrics. Take your time. There's no rush. Hopefully you're not rushing through it. I like to stick with I like to stick with like a family of colors. That's what I tend to do. In almost every single one of these, I'm within a family. I've used low volumes, of course, but I'm looking at peaches, browns, and corals, yellows. So that's really, my color palettes are always pretty tight. I'm not choosing from all bunches of different, I'm not using blue, yellow, green, red, orange. Like, I'm not choosing from different families. I tend to choose from maybe one or two families, like corals or pinks and reds, and then maybe yellows, golds, and browns. So that's the way I make my quilts, but of course, always do you. But take your time and look at page 2 and, see what's touching. The ones to me that are most important for choosing, I'm going to put them on the screen now. Those are the ones that I think I would spend my most time on, choosing high contrast for those bits. Everything else will blend together nicely and I don't think matters as much as those there. So that's all. Let's move on to cutting fabrics. So I hope you enjoyed that lesson. Just as a reminder, my Inner Beauty quilt pattern is already out and about. It's released, ready to go. You can buy a paper copy or a PDF copy over at my shop, meanderandmake.com. If you're interested in the class, I'm going to put a link below for that too. I'm also going to put links to all the fabric collections in the kit page that I showed you in the video. So all of that is below. The class releases tomorrow. Pop back in tomorrow and I'm going to be showing you an overview of what to expect in the pattern and in the class.